Hey friends, hope the morning's treating you well. Hope you got your coffee. I got mine. This is the 100th Saturday in a row that I've sat down and addressed you guys. Our little Saturday coffee chats is one of the things that some of you like best. Maybe you can tell me down in the comments, those of you who've been here for all 100. I'm sure some of you have. But just so you know, I've published over 500 videos on this channel in the last couple years. That's quite a lot. And I privated some of those, but there's well over 400 public right now. But we have 100 of these Saturday morning things. I've published them in Sweden just a few weeks ago, on Brighton Beach, on the beach in Mexico watching the sunrise, in the Netherlands, in exotic places like Iowa, Maine, and Texas, and Nashville, Tennessee, and even in Indianapolis. And I wanted to tell you about the path that kind of led me to here, talking to you on YouTube. And I've been a musician, as a lot of you know, for most of my life. And I've been fortunate enough to make a living doing that for quite a while now. And my path, I like to say that all of us would like to walk through the front door of the music business, but most of us are not on the guest list. So what are you going to do at that point? And I chose a DIY path and figured I don't need anybody's permission to make music. And if I could figure out a way to make a living doing that, I will do that. So the way I look at what I do is I have a lawn care business. I own one lawnmower and I'm the guy pushing it. So I can mow only so many lawns. I go to somebody's lawn and I move it. That's the way I look at my music thing. And along the way, I started getting opportunities where people wanted to interview me. A lot of those were really nice people who meant well. Some of those opportunities were pretty good opportunities, and I enjoyed it. But man, a lot of them were just really terrible. I mean, really terrible. One example, I won't say where this is, because the promoters, I really love them and I don't want to hang them out to dry. But a promoter said, hey, there's the newspaper, it's a major newspaper, wants to do an interview for the show. Will you do it? I'm like, yeah. So I get the interview, or the newspaper contacts me. They sent me this list of questions, extremely generic questions. I mean, really generic questions. What are your influences? Really terrible things like that. And so I wrote out, this is an email thing, I wrote out really long, detailed answers to everything, trying to make them entertaining so that when someone reads that, they will think, well, this is an interesting person. Maybe I'll go to that show. That's the whole point of this thing, is to reach people. And they went ahead and printed it, and at the show, I got on stage, hey, anybody check out the such and such? Complete silence in the room. This happens over and over and over again, About a year and a half, I went back to the same place, and the promoter said, will you do an interview with the local? And I'm like, okay, whatever. And they emailed these questions. They were the exact same questions that they asked me a year and a half earlier. The exact same ones, just a copy and paste. And I'm thinking, this is ridiculous. So I thought, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? So hell with it. I dug up my answers, and I sent back the exact same answers I gave a year and a half earlier. And they published them. They didn't even notice. And I thought, okay, whatever. The gig, hey, anybody check out the interview? Silence, nobody knows. Both of these gigs were full. It was full houses where I ended up filling the place anyway, with nobody checking out the local press that happened. And like I said, major newspaper. About a year and a half later, I go back. The promoter's like, man, it really helps out if you can do that interview with the newspaper. And I'm like, man, I don't want anything to do with them. And I'm like, I like the promoter. They're trying. I want them to think I'm trying. So, okay. So they send me the exact same questions. The third time in a row, the same damn major newspaper sent me the exact same questions. And I just sent back an email saying, I'm not going to play this game with you anymore. I'm done. And we sold out the gig. And so there's one example. There's a lot of stuff like that. You go to do interviews. If you have there used to be this moment with interviews. When I was a younger person, you would pick up Rolling Stone or Cream or Spin, or No Depression. And there were people writing wonderfully in these things. And there would be names that you would trust writing in there. And they would say, this right here is really good. You should check this out. And it really meant something. And I'd go check it out. And these people used their loudspeaker so that people like me in rural Indiana would know about, something that I probably wouldn't know about before. I'd go buy that because they said it was good and I trusted them. They built that trust and they had that platform. It's a beautiful thing. Somewhere along the line, it turned around to where if they're going to write about you, they would check your social media numbers. And you had to have a certain amount of a following on social media, which I always had they wanted it to be a very active thing. And then they would decide you had enough people. So if they write about you, the agreement would be you have to post it to all of your social media. And what happens is you end up sending traffic to their publication, because nobody's reading what they're doing unless you do that. So they'll write something about you, but they're not turning anybody onto you. You're turning people on to this publication. It's really backwards and it's broken, and it bothered me. There's things like that would really bother me. It goes way deeper than that, but I don't want to get sidetracked too early here. But so there was just so many opportunities that would come up. And, usually they're like, will you drive an hour out of the way while you're on tour and film something for my YouTube channel? You got to play a song while you're sitting in my shed or sitting on my commode or sitting in a van or something like that. Oh, but you have to play a cover. And we want it to be a quirky cover so it really catches on. Stupid crap like that. And I'm like, no, I'm not going to do that, And then people that you're working with look at you like, oh, you don't want to play ball. This isn't good. You got to work harder than that, I'm like, this isn't an opportunity, And you look at the channel, and they'd have no views, and you're like, what kind of opportunity is this? All of that is to say, it would lead us to this point to where I'm thinking, I'm kind of done with this, I'm tired of this, and I was just saying no to most things because I just didn't want to partake in it. And it's a charade that I didn't want to be part of. The idea is I want to reach people, so I go on their platform, but a lot of times they don't have an audience, or if they have an audience, they're asking me questions that just have nothing, they're not interesting, and I'm boring the audience, or I want to entertain the audience. And so this brings us to a particular interview I did. I didn't want to do it, but my friend who works very hard for my shows over there put it together, and she's like, I think it'd be a really good thing, why don't you do it? And I felt kind of bad saying no, so I went ahead and said, okay, let's do it. So we go, and it's a radio station, and it's a very nice big radio station, so they must have had some audience. And it's a big open room, and the host was actually being he's just a regular person. He's being nice. We're talking just like regular people do. I'm like, well, this won't be so bad. He had some kind of music playing in the background that was on the air, and he's like, hey, what do you think about that? And I listened for a second. I'm like, it's not my sort of thing. And he's like, oh, that's John Mayer. And I'm like, oh, I'd never heard John Mayer before. This is a long time ago. John Mayer stands beside Bob Ware every night on stage. He's awesome. At that moment, what I heard on the radio, I didn't really dig, So we're about to go on the air. I'm sitting, and he picks up a wireless microphone, and he's hand-holding this wireless microphone and walking around me back and forth. And as soon as he goes on the air, he starts talking and turns into this wacky radio guy. Hey, blah, blah, blah. It's a completely different personality than the real person I was just talking to. I'm here live on blah, 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 and sitting here with Otis Gibbs. Hey, Otis, why do you hate John Mayer? And I kind of paused for a second. There's this dead air, and I'm like, are you serious? Oh, God. And I said, what do you mean by that? And, well, we were just listening to John Mayer, and you were telling me he's terrible, and you blah, blah. And it just all started going to hell. And one, I don't trust him now, at all. And I just kind of being a little bit quiet. And we do an interview that's pretty bad. I'm not saying it's the worst interview I'd ever been part of, but it was pretty bad. And the whole idea of that is for me to come on and entertain people and win people over. This lasted an hour. There's an hour of this train wreck. And I'm just sitting there in the chair thinking, I want to just walk out, and say, screw this. But my friend put a lot of effort into setting this up, and that would make her look bad. I don't want to do that. So I sat there and just kind of like went through it. And if they had a big audience, anybody that would listen to that guy could care less about me. It's just not the right platform. And at the gig, I asked, did anybody hear nobody heard it, and I just sat and thought about it. Maybe on the way back from there, but I was like, this is the last interview I'm ever going to do. I don't really want anything to do with being interviewed anymore. And I thought about it real serious. And for about a week, I was thinking about it really hard. And I decided, yeah, screw it, man. I'm not being called by Terry Gross, Bob Edwards, David Letterman. There's like not these platforms that I always thought were great platforms that I would like to be on. It just wasn't a thing. I figured, okay, you're going to not do interviews. Nobody's even going to notice that you're not doing interviews, Otis. Nobody's going to notice unless they're working with you. And I'm a big believer in life. You can't just be against things. You have to be for things. What's the positive outcome? What are you going to do to make it better? I'm a believer at that, like in my core. I don't always know how to do that, so it's frustrating sometimes. A lot of us feel that way. But I figure in life you have to be for something. You got to be, so why talk about what you hate? Talk about what you're for. And I thought, well, what can I do that's proactive and positive? And I'd been listening to a lot of podcasts, and the podcasts were just starting out, like the first little bubble up where Marin had just started out, and I was enjoying that platform. The thing I liked most about it is anybody could do it. You do it, you put it out into the world exactly as you would like it to be, and either people care or they don't. And but you at least get to put out there who you are, and they know who you are, what it is that you dig, and all of this. So I thought, I'm going to create this podcast that will be an interview platform where I will interview people and bring them on a platform that I wish existed. And I would sit there quietly and I would listen to them, and I wouldn't be the wacky person, and we'd talk about things that were deep. And I wanted it to be all music history right from the get-go. I didn't quite have the guts to go all the way in on that until we got in however many episodes, and then I went all the way on that. So the audience loved that part of it, so we just went all in on it. But before I published the first episode, I had made quite a few different ones, just trying to figure out what exactly it should be. And put yourself in my shoes, which you've felt this way before yourself. There's a strong possibility that I might be terrible at it. And it might suck, and I might really embarrass myself. That's a strong possibility. And I thought about that, and I was worried about that, but I said, the hell with it. I have to try it. I have to put this out into the world. And I remember being in Bremen, Norway with my friend Runa. Hey, Runa, how you doing? We're driving around in the car, and I'm telling him about it. And I'm like, man, I'm going to publish this within the next week. And he's like, oh, this sounds great. And I'm like, I don't know, man. I'm all worried about it. I'm telling him about it. And I remember being in Stockholm, somewhere, telling my friend Bjorn, hey, Bjorn, about it. I'm just all excited about it. I'm like, no, this is good. Throwing things good out into the world is a good thing. I'm just worried about it. And I published my first episode. I woke up. I slept with the window open in Avesta, Sweden, and some out in the middle of nowhere, a little Airbnb on a farm where I played a gig the night before. I slept with the window open, and I woke up, and there's like a brass railing on the bed, and there was a sparrow sitting on the railing, and he was kind of singing, and I woke up to his singing, and I just kind of opened my eyes and sat there for like 6 minutes looking at him, and he finally got up and flew out the window, and I was just kind of like, wow. I'm not saying it was a sign, but it was a beautiful thing to wake up to, and I was in a good mood. And I walked over and I hit publish, and I published the first episode of the podcast. I went on to do 170 something episodes of this, and it became like just this wonderful thing in my life. It was unbelievably hard. I promised myself I would make 50 episodes in 50 weeks, once a week for 50 weeks, and then decide if I wanted to continue it. And it was very, very hard because I didn't know how to do it. But I was trying it, and I would get online and I would Google things. Everything I learned by Googling. Spent hours and hours and hours trying to learn whatever I could from it. And it was pretty engulfing. And but I did it. And then I did 50 more and got to 100. So I'd done that 100 weeks in a row. And then I just told the audience, I can't do this. I can't keep this schedule going, so I'll just do it whenever I do. And the audience even grew from there when I started doing it more. So I got to like 170. I met so many nice people. And I should also say, I didn't make any money from this. I didn't know how to monetize it. There was no way. I didn't know how to monetize it. And then after a few weeks, I just sat and thought, screw it. It doesn't need to be. Why does everything have to be monetized? So it was this investment I did with myself. I invested in myself. And I loved it. And then one day, I get this email. It says from somebody from Pandora, the streaming service, and they said, we're starting a history of country music type show, and we would like you to host it. Are you interested? And I'm thinking, what? And one thing led to another, and I ended up doing it. They paid me like a ridiculous amount of money. Somebody there liked my podcast. This thing that I had done in hotels, in airports, literally, in a barn in Sweden once. Things that I just made whenever I could, when I could, interviewing friends and people. I should also say that a big part of this, I knew all of these people who had amazing stories that I would see interviews from them, and people would ask them, well, tell me about your process. And you just hear the audience getting bored. And, well, who are your influences? Just all of the generic, questions that everybody always asks that doesn't really tell you much about the person. It just fills time. And, but they would have this great story. And I would think, why don't people ask about that? So I asked about those things. I wanted to know about those things. And people really reacted to that. And, there was a lot of goodwill. It builds goodwill. I met a lot of cool people. I got to sit in Reggie Young's living room, and get to know him a little bit. And just so many people that I've met, and beautiful, beautiful moments. And but anyway, the Pandora people contacted me, and it was kind of like, wow, I invested in myself by just doing this thing I felt like needed to be done. And I used to say that you could learn more about me. You could take all the interviews of me being interviewed, everything out there in the entire world, and none of that would add up to what you could learn about me by listening to me for 30 seconds sit silently while someone told a good story. So you learn more about me as a person by me sitting quietly during my podcast, listening to a story and trying to make somebody else look great, and keeping trust with them. And I believe that. I've said that quite a few times and pissed off a few journalists, but it's true. And anyway, I did this Pandora thing. We did 2 seasons. It was great. It was honestly the most positive experience I've ever had in music. They treated me unbelievably great. So much respect. I mean, they treated me with so much respect, and have nothing but positive things. We did 2 seasons. There were 3 million subscribers to that show. I've never met one of them. I'm not sure who they were, but if you're out there, tell me. And then I kept doing the podcast, and then the pandemic started, and I couldn't get with people one-on-one to interview them because everybody's locked down. So the podcast went on hiatus, and I intended to start it back up at some point. But while I'm sitting there in this ugly moment that we were all living through, trying to figure out, how to spend the hours of the day, I have tours canceled, had 5 tours canceled. I'm worried about money. It was starting to look pretty bleak. And we just moved to Indianapolis, from Nashville, and we're just kind of locked down. And I thought, well, screw it, man. I've always been able to just talk to people and calm them down. Let's talk about music. Let's just change the subject. And if I release a 12-minute video today, there's 12 minutes where people, where I'm distracted putting it together and people are distracted and smiling, enjoying the story or whatever. So I just started doing that. And man, it took off way quicker. I just didn't expect anything from it. And it just started doing really well, more than I thought. I just didn't realize how YouTube worked. I didn't know anything about it. And it just started growing. And throughout the pandemic, it was a lifeline for me to be able to, and I started this Saturday thing somewhere along the line. People were saying, why don't you live stream, Otis? And I was like, I don't even know. I don't want to take the time to figure out how to do that. Plus, I'd rather just sit here and talk. So I started just talking to people every Saturday. Sometimes it'd be an hour, sometimes it'd be way less, but I'm just talking to people. And we started this community of you guys, and it's just been a really wonderful, beautiful thing. And so now I'm over 2 years into this. Like I said, over 500 videos published, and we started a Patreon thing. That's another thing, is now it's kind of consuming all of my time, because I enjoy doing it. And I feel guilty because the podcast is on hiatus and I don't see myself going back. So I make a little bit of money on this. And I'm at a point in my life where I have to make some money if this is what I'm going to do every day, for long periods of time every day. I have to have a family I got to support and all that. And this has been able to do a little bit of that. People have joined my Patreon and my channel memberships. Those people have been wonderful and have helped, sustain this whole thing and keep it upright. If you would like to join them, I strongly urge you to do it because it really helps this channel. We'll say if you enjoy the things that, these interviews I'm able to do and throw out into the world, and make an archive of stories that may have been lost if I didn't go find them. I'm really not patting myself on the back here. I don't mean it like that. Just trying to give you the perspective of myself and how I got here. But if you'd like to support that would be great. If you just want to watch, that's all right. Believe me, I understand. If you just want to watch, that's fine. You don't have to open the wallets or anything. But I'm going to continue doing this. There's a tab there's a thing that I just found out about on that YouTube is rolling out where they have a podcast tab. I've kept all of these Saturday shows, all 100 of them, in a list, in a playlist. You can find all of them. It's called Saturday Morning Coffee Chat. There's also now a podcast tab somewhere. I've included all of those in that podcast tab, so I think you can listen to only the audio that way. I honestly don't know that much more about it, other than YouTube sent an email saying do that. Maybe you can Google and find out more. They haven't explained it all. They're not real great at explaining everything sometimes. But as the weeks and months roll on, I think it'll be more obvious, and you can listen to all 100 of these episodes as audio if you're into that, like a podcast. I don't know if you can listen via Spotify. I don't think so. It might be like from the YouTube Music app. I don't know. There's a lot I don't know. But I know I dig being here, and I appreciate y'all letting me go through this rant. And it's about to rain. We're in between the rain, and I'm going to finish my coffee. And I'll see you guys soon. Thank you for being here. Happy 100, and much love to you.